The girl straightened her back, her voice ringing with pride. I speak 9 languages. The billionaire's laugh was sharp, almost cruel, but the sound died in his throat. Rick Sullivan leaned back in his leather chair, his office glittering with wealth on the 52nd floor of Sullivan Tech black marble walls, priceless paintings, thick carpet that swallowed footsteps. Every inch of the room screamed power. He adjusted his $80,000 watch so the light caught it, like a weapon polished for war. To him, money was proof of superiority. Send them in. He ordered into the gold-plated intercom. The doors slid open. Carmen Johnson entered, uniform crisp, pushing a supply cart. At her side walked her daughter, Lucia, 12 years old. Backpack worn but spotless, shoes polished with care. Her eyes scanned the office slowly, memorizing every corner of the place her mother had worked for nearly a decade but had never been invited to see. Rick circled them like a predator, his smirk cut sharper than knives. 8 years scrubbing floors, with only a high school diploma. And now your little girl dreams big? Don't fool yourself. Girls with your skin color don't climb these days. The words landed heavy, poisonous. Carmen lowered her gaze, but Lucia did not. Rick waved a bundle of old yellow pages. This, he said, is a manuscript I bought at auction. Top translators failed. It's written in 6 ancient languages. Tell me, little girl, can you read it? Carmen's stomach knotted. Rick's insults had become routine over the years, but this time his target wasn't her. It was her daughter. Lucia met his eyes calmly. Can you read it? Rick stiffened. I'm a businessman, not a translator. Then, she said softly, you shouldn't laugh at others who can't. The air shifted. The silence grew taut. Rick snapped back. Don't talk back. You're a poor kid from public school, claiming you can do what scholars couldn't? Ridiculous. Lucia's voice stayed steady. I speak 9 languages. Carmen almost gasped. Rick scoffed. 9? Prove it. Lucia began counting them off, each one crisp, each one pronounced perfectly. Spanish, English, Mandarin, Arabic, French, Portuguese, Italian, German, Russian. Rick forced out a laugh, but it cracked at the edges. The library runs free classes, Lucia explained. Our teachers aren't wealthy, but they are brilliant. I learn from them, from books, from anyone willing to share knowledge. You don't need money to learn. You need respect and persistence. For the first time in years, Carmen felt her shame lift. She saw her daughter not as someone destined to repeat her footsteps, but as someone breaking new ground. Rick shoved the manuscript forward. Fine. Show me. Lucia laid her hands on the brittle paper. Her voice carried through the office, first in classical Chinese, sharp and precise, then Arabic, flowing like song. Sanskrit followed, thick with ancient weight, then Hebrew, Persian, and finally Latin. Each tongue distinct, each word alive. Rick's jaw hung open. This was a power he had never bought, never owned. Knowledge, mastery, dignity. Carmen's eyes filled with tears. Her daughter, once studying under a flickering bulb, now commanded the very languages of history. Lucia looked up. Shall I translate? Rick could only nod. The manuscript says wisdom isn't found in towers of gold, she said. True wealth is dignity. True power doesn't crush others. It lifts them. Her words pierced deeper than any insult Rick had ever delivered. His empire suddenly felt hollow. For the first time in years, his pride crumbled. I'm sorry, he muttered. Carmen froze. In 8 years, no one in this office had ever apologized to her. But Lucia only shook her head. Words aren't enough, she said softly. Change is shown in actions. Rick lowered his gaze. For once, the man who ruled a city of glass and steel had nothing left to say. Her words didn't just echo in the room. They tilted its balance. Rick's gaze wavered. If you're serious about change, Lucia said, voice steady but not cruel, then I'll set the conditions. But first, I'll finish translating. On the 52nd floor of Manhattan, the script had flipped. The opening strike of a billionaire had been overturned by the knowledge of a child. Control in that office had shifted, no longer in the hands of the man with marble walls and gold watches, but in the girl whose hands rested on a manuscript older than empires. Lucia began again, unlocking meaning in careful layers. The first layer, she said, is instruction, a warning. Whoever believes money makes them greater than others is actually the poorest of all. Whoever uses power to humiliate others is weak, for they cannot stand tall without forcing others to shrink. Rick's hand gripped the stone desk. It had always been cold comfort, a throne he built himself. But in that moment, it felt brittle. His old habit whispered in his mind. Argue, twist logic, drown truth in numbers. But logic wasn't something he could purchase anymore. Truth had arrived in a dozen tongues, undeniable. Lucia continued, unhurried. The second layer is metaphor. The text compares language to a river. As water flows, it changes shape, it changes color, but it remains water. People, too, change skin color, jobs, bank accounts. Yet they remain human. Their dignity does not change. She lifted her eyes and landed on Rick when she said the word dignity. Carmen felt it like an arrow straight to her heart. She had known indignity all her life, being called cleaning lady instead of a name, being timed like a machine, being unseen even in full view. But to hear her daughter speak the word aloud was like a locked door finally breaking open. Lucia placed her hand on the final page. The third layer is choice. When the powerful realize they have been blind to wisdom, that is the moment they decide to awaken or to condemn themselves. The word condemn dropped into Rick's chest like a heavy stone. Suddenly, his empire looked less like a fortress and more like golden handcuffs. The paintings, the chandeliers, the gleaming glass, they felt like cages he had decorated for himself. His eyes shifted to Carmen. For the first time, he saw not a uniform, not a servant, but a mother who had carried more than her share of the world. I was wrong, Rick said, his voice unsteady. But Lucia didn't let it end there. She raised 3 fingers. There are conditions. If you mean what you say, then prove it. Rick nodded. He understood. Power, today, meant obedience to truth. 1. Lucia said, you apologize to my mother properly. Not just a day's insult. 8 years of silence. Say her full name. Look her in the eyes when you do it. Rick toned, facing Carmen directly for the first time. His lips stumbled, then found strength. Carmen Johnson, I'm sorry. Sorry for treating you like you were invisible. Sorry for humiliating you in front of your daughter. Sorry for never once asking who you are beyond this uniform. His voice broke on the word person. Carmen did not forgive immediately. She stood taller, not out of pride, but recognition. The man who once ignored her name was now forced to speak it like it mattered. 2, Lucia said, use your power the right way. Scholarships for kids from working families, especially those the system overlooks. Fund free language programs at the library. And inside your company, build real power for workers like my mom. Hidden talent deserves light. Rick didn't argue about costs, didn't ask about returns. He simply asked, how many scholarships make it real? 150, Lucia answered firmly. Enough to carry an entire class forward. Not a PR stunt. A true commitment. Rick nodded. He didn't even write it down. He knew this promise was carved deeper than contracts. And 3, Lucia said, raising her last finger. You learn a new language. Start from zero, like we did, every Tuesday, after work, at the New York Public Library. No private tutors, no VIP seats. Just wooden tables, pencils, and patience. I'll teach you Mandarin myself. Rick let out a small laugh, not cruel this time, but embarrassed. The very idea he had mocked earlier was now his test. Agreed, he said. I'll be there Tuesday. Lucia searched his eyes. She didn't shake hands. Not yet. She needed truth, not gestures. Rick didn't look away. He knew avoiding things had brought him here. Do you want the conclusion? She asked, resting her hand on the manuscript. Yes, he whispered. The final passage. Lucia read aloud. The richest person is the one who enriches others. The strongest is the one who helps the weak to stand. The wisest is the one who remembers he was once blind. Carmen wept, not from shame, but release. Years of silence, of invisibility, were lifting as though someone else finally carried part of the weight. Rick turned toward the window. Below him, Manhattan roared with traffic and lights. Yet his eyes searched not for skyscrapers, but for a building he had never entered, the public library, where his new journey would begin. Lucia closed the manuscript gently. We're done here. See you Tuesday. Bring a notebook with grid lines and a pencil. Homework. Practice the 4 tones. Copy 10 radicals. Rick gave a small, honest smile. The first one all afternoon. Understood, he said. He turned again to Carmen. Thank you, Carmen. A name doesn't make you poorer. Sometimes it's the first step to becoming truly rich. Mother and daughter pushed the cart toward the door. But this time, the carpet didn't swallow the sound of their steps. Perhaps the room itself had shifted, its gravity, its weight, its rules. Tuesday would come. With it, pages full of clumsy pronunciations, scholarships to design, questions from his peers. But somewhere deep in the invisible ledger of Rick's life, 3 new lines had been written. The youngest teacher Rick Sullivan had ever known was 12 years old, Lucia Johnson. The lobby of the New York Public Library smelled of old paper and polished wood. Rick stood there awkwardly, clutching a cheap grid-lined notebook and a pencil he had bought at the counter downstairs. For the first time in years, he had arrived somewhere on time without an assistant shadowing him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he didn't reach for it. He scanned the study hall, an elderly woman guiding her grandson through math, a row of teenagers scribbling furiously over homework, immigrants pecking at keyboards as if afraid the words might vanish before they press save. You came. Lucy appeared with backpack bulging with books, her hair tied back neatly, a navy hoodie slipping off one shoulder. She didn't bow to wealth, nor gloat at his presence. Class rules, she said firmly. No VIPs. Phones off. Don't interrupt. Mistakes get corrected, not ridiculed. Rick nodded, silencing his phone and setting it aside. Lucia flipped open her notebook. 4 marks filled the first page. 1 flat, 1 rising, 1 dipping then rising, 1 falling stroke. Ma, 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 she said, her tones crisp as glass. Rick repeated, clumsy and off-key. Ma. The sound dropped heavy against the table. Lucia smiled, not mocking, but encouraging. Better than most first tries. By the 3rd, you'll sound smoother. Now again. Sweat prickled Rick's neck. At the Summit Club, 1 mispronunciation would earn laughter. Hey, mistakes were ladders. At the next table, a middle-aged man nodded quietly as Rick finally landed the sound right. This is Dr. Ahmed, Lucia introduced. He teaches me Arabic. Taxi driver by day, scholar by night. Rick stood awkwardly, shaking his hand. He had spent decades greeting billionaires, yet here he felt clumsy before a man without a title on his suit. Good evening, Mr. Sullivan, Ahmed said, his English slow and graceful. Hey, we switch roles. Humility is our common language. The word sank deep. Later, Mrs. Wang passed by. Lucia called to her. He pronounced Ma correctly today. Mrs. Wang's smile crinkled her eyes. Everyone stumbles at first. The important part is stumbling forward. Rick chuckled. He had built an empire by never showing weakness. Tonight he was being taught how to fall, and fall properly. By the end of class, Lucy assigned homework. 10 radicals, 5 greetings, 20 rounds of tones. Same spot next Tuesday, table 12. If you miss, you make it up. Not with money. Rick nodded, strangely relieved. The room, so modest compared to his 52nd floor, felt safer than any boardroom he'd sat in. The next morning, Sullivan Tech's boardroom filled with directors. But instead of revenue charts, the big screen displayed 4 words: scholarships, libraries, career paths listening circles. CFO Mark Green frowned. How much? Shareholders will demand to know where profit is in this. Rick answered without hesitation. 150 scholarships for working-class students. Long-term funding for 12 library branches. A ladder so service workers can reign and rise. ROI, measure in retention, quality, reputation. Give it a year. The VP of HR asked, who leads this? Rick gestured. Carmen Johnson stepped forward, not in a janitor's uniform, but with a notebook. On its cover, names, listening, fairness, opportunity. She spoke plainly. Respect begins with names. Next, we listen with responsibility. Then we fix schedules, contracts, benefits. Opportunity is useless unless paired with guidance. A murmur rose in the back. Isn't this favoritism? Just for black staff. Rick's voice cut firm. Anyone doubtful, join today's listening circle. Sit with Carmen. Sit with Lucia. Hear their stories before you judge the policy. That afternoon, chairs formed a circle. Software developers, janitors, managers, and guards sat as equals. Lucia opened with a question. When have you felt invisible at work? An Indian engineer confessed he'd been mocked for his accent. A cleaner admitted she'd been called a lady for 3 years, never by her real name. A manager shrugged. I didn't mean it. Lucia replied calmly. It's not about intent. It's about impact. From now on, use people's names. If you slip, correct it. No excuses. By evening, an anonymous Slack post appeared. Tuesday Mandarin with a janitor's kid. Mandatory yet. It wasn't profane, but venom dripped from every word. Rick responded publicly. We don't mandate language classes. We mandate respect. If anyone calls her the janitor's kid, then yes, you need to relearn how to speak. Debate flared. Some thanked him, others rolled their eyes. Rick didn't censor the thread. Instead, he scheduled 2 more listening circles. Carmen kept time. Lucy asked questions. Dr. Ahmed and Mrs. Wang sat in quiet witness. By the 3rd session, the room began to understand. This wasn't favoritism. This was balance. But backlash came from outside. A finance blog sneered. Sullivan Tech goes woke. CEO learns Mandarin from janitor's daughter. The comments dripped racism. Rick read them all, then emailed his company. When you press against injustice, it screams. That scream is proof you've hit the nerve. Keep pressing. Tuesday night, Rick returned to table 12. Lucia asked, where are the 10 radicals? Rick slid a page covered in messy strokes. She gave a small nod, enough to keep him hungry to return. For an hour, he stumbled through characters. Each correct mark earned a wink from Mrs. Wang. Each mistake earned Ahmed's patient whisper, slow down. At the end, Lucia gave the next task. Next week, a short passage in classical Chinese. No phonetics. You'll stumble. That's the point. Rick laughed. Turns out success is tones too. I've been pronouncing it wrong for years. Lucia tapped his notebook. Tomorrow at your company, there will be hard sounds too. 1 right syllable at a time makes a sentence. That night, Manhattan glowed. The 52nd floor still towered, but Rick found warmth in the library's smaller lights. He realized power isn't lost when you learn to say sorry. It only shifts, from mocking laughter to the nods of those who were never invited to the table. Friday noon at the Summit Club. Dark wood panels, velvet curtains, wine glasses gleaming. Bradley Carter of hedge funds, Sebastian Price of pharma, Ethan Cole of telecom leaned in. Men who measured human worth in quarterly returns. Bradley sneered. So, Rick, social justice now? Taking Mandarin at a public library? Promoting a janitor to management? Rick set his glass down. Her name is Carmen Johnson. She leads our people program. And I'm learning Mandarin from my 12-year-old teacher, Lucia Johnson. Sebastian scoffed. Is this PR? Selling out to Chinese investors. Ethan muttered. Talent doesn't grow in basements. Rick didn't flinch. Dr. Ahmed was once professor of Arabic literature. Mrs. Wang chaired a department in Beijing. They teach in libraries because of borders, not because they are lesser. It took me 51 years to see that. Bradley's voice cracked sharp. This weakens us. Shareholders don't like it. Rick smiled without venom. If shareholders oppose respect, maybe Sullivan Tech isn't their company anymore. Sebastian's eyes narrowed. Adjust in 1 week or leave the circle. Rick stood calmly. Then I'll leave now. I already have a new circle. The library, the classroom, the scholarships. He walked away. Behind him, the word lunatic hissed into the velvet air, a stone landing on carpet with no echo. Monday, at the shareholders' meeting, charts filled the room, margins and forecasts. One shareholder asked sharply, costs are rising, scholarships, libraries. What about profits? Rick answered directly. Yes, costs rose, but turnover dropped. Productivity stabilized. Accidents fell 30% after retraining. The applicant pool doubled. Test it yourselves. 2 divisions with a model, 2 without. 6 months. Measure again. I'll bet on people. Mid-session, an aide whispered urgently. Rick excused himself. In the lobby, the new Lucia Johnson scholarship poster had been defaced. A crude drawing. Beside it, stay in your lane. No slurs, but the intent was sharp. Skin. Status. Carmen stood pale but unbroken. Lucia arrived seconds later. She stared at it silently, raised her phone, snapped a photo, then turned. We do 2 things, she said. 1, erase it. Filth doesn't get to linger. 2, don't erase in silence. Rick called janitorial staff with solution, then set down a portable speaker. His voice carried. This attack is against Carmen Johnson, against Lucia Johnson, against anyone who believes education is a right. We don't retaliate with hate, but there are consequences. Security review, suspension, mandatory training, an apology if the harmed choose to accept. A mid-level manager's voice broke. I did it. I was angry. The company's changing too fast. I didn't mean her skin. Carmen faced him, not shouting, but firm. Lack of intent doesn't erase impact. You fear losing ground, but pushing me down is not where your ground comes from. Rick's voice cut final. 3-week suspension. Required listening circles. Public apology. And reflection before you return. The room was silent. Then, slowly, heads nodded. For once, the apology would not rise from marble halls. It would rise from humility.